For decades, Eamonn Holmes has been one of Britain's most familiar faces, a broadcaster whose warmth, quick wit, and steady presence have brought comfort to millions across the country. People see him as confident, charming, effortlessly composed, the kind of man who can brighten any morning with a single sentence. But while viewers see the professional, the performer, the polished presenter, behind closed doors, a very different chapter has been unfolding. A chapter full of family tension, personal heartache, emotional exhaustion, and moments that have pushed him to the edge of what even the strongest heart can bear. Those closest to him say that the past few years have quietly been some of the most challenging of his entire life. And yet, he kept going, day after day, standing beneath studio lights with a smile the world believed was effortless. But it wasn't. It all began with pressure, slow at first, then relentless. Long-standing disagreements within the family had grown more complicated. What started as small misunderstandings slowly became bigger divides. Differences in priorities, communication breakdowns, and the noise of outside opinions added fuel to tensions he desperately wanted to calm. Eamonn has always tried to be the peacekeeper, the glue, the bridge between people who no longer understood one another. But even the strongest mediator eventually reaches a point where holding everyone together feels like holding cracked glass with bare hands. Painful, delicate, and nearly impossible. Friends say he would often come home after work, hang up his coat, sit quietly at the edge of the sofa, and take a deep breath, trying to gather the strength to solve problems that simply didn't want to be solved. The public never saw those moments. They only saw the jokes, the laughter, the easy charm. Behind the scenes, he was tired. Tired in ways no camera could ever capture. And if family struggles weren't enough, he was also carrying grief that settled into his life without warning. People he cared about, friends, mentors, the familiar faces who shaped chapters of his life began slipping into memories instead of daily phone calls. Some friendships faded naturally over time, others changed as life pulled people in different directions, and a few losses cut deeper than he ever expected. Colleagues noticed that some days, when the cameras turned off, Eamonn would pause for a moment longer than usual, as if gathering himself before stepping back into the world, a world that expected him to smile, joke, and brighten everyone else's mood, even on days he felt far from bright himself. In rare interviews, he admitted that grief comes quietly, in the middle of lunch, during a car ride, once even while choosing flowers for the garden. It never waited for permission. On top of everything else, personal health challenges added another layer of vulnerability. Nothing dramatic, nothing that needed public attention, but enough to make him reflect on the fragility of life, enough to make him feel things he had spent years avoiding, enough to make every loss, every disagreement, every emotional hit feel heavier than before. Still, Eamonn carried on, professionally flawless, privately fragile. Colleagues describe him as one of the kindest souls in the industry, the type of person who asks how everyone else is doing before mentioning a word about himself. He hides his pain not because of pride, but because he wants to protect the people he cares about. But in the middle of all this heaviness, something beautiful happened, a shift within him that brought moments of unexpected sweetness and even laughter. He started cherishing small things more deeply. Coffee in the living room instead of rushing out the door. A call with a friend he hadn't spoken to in months. A walk outside on a day that wasn't particularly special but suddenly felt like a gift. Even his sense of humor changed. Softer at times, but also funnier in a way that only someone who has lived through real emotion can manage. In fact, friends say his new version of humor is even more charming. One friend joked, "This man can turn a family argument into a romantic comedy scene." Another said, "Eamonn could make a feud sound like a punchline, and somehow it works." It became his way of healing, his way of turning pain into something lighter.
But even with his humor, the family turmoil didn't magically disappear. Old wounds take time. Relationships require patience. And the people in Eamonn's life had to learn, slowly and sometimes painfully, how to meet each other in the middle again. Some days brought progress, some brought setbacks. Some ended with laughter, others ended quietly. But throughout it all, Eamonn remained committed to reconnecting, rebuilding, and choosing love over resentment. Then came the moment the world found out about his emotional struggles. Not through scandal, not through drama, but through gentle revelations from people who cared about him, people who could no longer watch him suffer in silence. Fans were stunned, shocked even. Eamonn Holmes, the man who made the nation laugh, the man who could brighten the dullest morning, had been carrying a heart full of unspoken pain. Social media erupted with messages of love, support, and compassion. "He's given us happiness for decades," one fan wrote. "He deserves peace more than anyone." Another said, "It breaks my heart to imagine him hurting, sending him strength." And many simply wrote, "We love you, Eamonn. Please take care of yourself." The outpouring of support lit a spark inside him, a reminder that he wasn't alone no matter how heavy things felt. Slowly, things began to shift for the better. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gently, the way healing often happens. Friends say he now speaks more openly about his emotions. He no longer hides everything behind his smile. He takes breaks, rests when he needs to, and confides in people he trusts. His relationships with family members began to repair themselves piece by piece. They laughed more. They listened more. They tried harder. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. They rediscovered old memories, shared stories over dinner again, and even cracked jokes about the silly arguments that once felt massive. And through all the chaos, Eamonn found something he hadn't felt in a long time: clarity, hope, and a renewed sense of what truly matters. He realized that life isn't defined by success or public praise or polished appearances. Life is defined by the people we love, the connections we fight for, and the joy we choose, even when choosing it is hard. Today, Eamonn stands stronger, wiser, and more open-hearted than ever. He's embracing romance in its simplest form: affectionate conversations, gentle moments, renewed closeness with loved ones. He's embracing humor, not to hide pain, but to lighten the world around him. And he's embracing hope, not just for himself, but for everyone who has ever carried private battles behind a public smile. His story reminds us that strength doesn't always look loud or confident. Sometimes strength looks like admitting you're tired. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. And sometimes it looks like choosing love, even after being hurt. Even in the darkest moments, connection endures. And Eamonn Holmes continues to prove that no matter what life throws at us, there is always a way forward, through compassion, honesty, forgiveness, and the courage to let others hold you up when you need it most.